practicing physician and blogger.
Figuring out childcare to map in mid-February of 20 listeners on as at a company that wasn't always and
Really not the case. And nothing in there is anything I want. Figuring out ways to really minimize the demands for
which, I mean, I wonder if
100%.
And when you're on, anyone would like that, but I think you
actually during call, it's easy the kids off most days, which is 3. And so I say
have her stay till like 10
would be wonderful because our kids run a little bit more smoothly.
And of having somebody send you with
I could.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, it's this these days, right? It's like your call. Anyway, Both Worlds listener, which is months ago on that show.
Okay. Like Laura said, I'm a part of the last 20 years, kind of gone through some my career where it was very unusual. I had worked.
Not then advertised.
I actually looked. So she said if they had planned to hire somebody, but I did get it. And then,
Well, I'm curious of that work. I mean, what are
project and had this was a little bit of a different, that was almost as soon as I started, I went to Seattle for orientation. That's just how the company works. And so I tried to make a point to meet everybody on my team in person, even though I wasn't sure, right at the first couple of days who I would be working with directly. But I think I managed to meet almost everybody except one person, face to face, at least briefly. And then when I got back to California, I set up one-on-one meetings over Microsoft Teams to just get to know the people on my team and, basically to introduce myself and what I was hired to do, and then, figure out what they were there and what their jobs were, but also just to talk about personal things, because you don't really get a chance to do that like in a business meeting, maybe a few minutes at the beginning. But I wanted to just find out more about my coworkers. And it was easier to actually have a meeting where we were set up to have an informal chat where that, where it was kind of okay. It wasn't all business. And that really helped. And it turns out it helped even more because those coworkers I haven't seen since that first orientation trip because of COVID. I haven't been back. So I'm really glad I, had the foresight to set that up front, considering I haven't seen them in 2 years. So that was super helpful. And just, I think we do a lot of email and a lot of meetings. So it's almost like, a lot of the people I work with are not in my immediate team anyway. So I would be sending email to them from the office if I worked there, or they'd be in another country. So some of that, you're kind of working remotely anyway, because your coworkers are in different locations. But yeah, I do make more of an effort to show up. We're not a team that likes to use our cameras very much on our video calls. So I do try to turn on my camera every now and then so people kind of see me. It does give a different feel. So I do consciously try to speak up more so that they remember that I'm there. And that helps, especially when they're all in a conference room and I'm, the only one who's dialing in. I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, any tips you have for that? Like, I mean, you don't just sit there and go like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm still here." I mean, so what's an authentic way? Again, if you are the only one who is not there and people are in a room, like, how do you integrate into that meeting?
Right. So I'm an introvert, and generally if I have questions, I'll make notes and ask later. I'll send emails and that sort of thing. But I've sort of trained myself a little bit out of that to actually speak up and ask the question in the moment. And that's part of the reason, right? To remind them that I'm still there. And so I'm like, asking for clarification. I mean, not making it up a situation where I, pretend like I need clarification, but there are often times where I do have a question. And just like, I think you had mentioned in one of your before breakfast episodes, just like participating in the chat that happens before the meeting starts. It's really easy to just put yourself on mute and keep checking your email or whatever. But I kind of make a point to talk to people and ask them, how their weekend was and do that just so they remember that I'm still there. Obviously, with the switch to remote work for COVID, it's been, so much easier because now everybody is, still remote on my team. So that definitely makes it easier. But I think just really, really it's about speaking up. So especially when we don't have video. So yes.
Yeah. And it's funny, I'm thinking about that, like, that your manager was like, well, we'll try to make it work. And of course, then he had to make it work for everybody
right
within a year. So It's good that you had pioneered that. Well, we'll be right back with more on Anandi's career and family life. So we're just going to take a quick ad break. So I am back with Anandi Raman Creath, who has been working for a tech company for 20 years in a variety of different positions, being fully remote, being part-time. I mean, you've always had these different iterations, right? In many cases, negotiating to get different working situations than was the norm. I wonder if you can talk through a little bit about the different things you've tried and what has been successful for you in terms of making the case for these alternate work arrangements.
Right. The best example I have, I've done it a lot of, many times, but the best example I have is when I had my daughter in 2009. A few weeks before I was scheduled to come back from maternity leave, I decided to go and talk to my manager about working part time. I had been working full time in the office up until then. So this was kind of a big switch. I was proposing going down to 25 hours a week and working 2 days in the office and then doing the, 2 long days and then doing maybe another 5 hours from home at various times during the week. And I knew that was going to be a hard sell. It was not something anybody else had done on our team. But we also knew, for our family that I could either work part time or I was going to quit at that point, at least for a little while. And so I went in and asked for it, and he, was really not enthusiastic about it. And I think he was pretty disappointed. But he said, let me think about it. And let me, he wanted to talk to his manager about it. And I said, okay. And, there is a little bit of, I don't want to say negotiating power, but I knew that it was either going to be part time or I was going to step back from working for a little while. And so I didn't feel nervous about it. I just, he was either going to say yes or no, and I had to leave it at that. I think one of the good things I did was before we met, I sent him an email with the outline of what I wanted to do because I wanted him to have a little bit of time to take it in. And I don't know if everybody needs that, but I am a person who needs that. If I'm going to have a kind of a difficult conversation, I'd like to know the details of what it's about first. And so I think that definitely helped because he was prepared for it. It was still, awkward when we talked about it, but it wasn't as awkward because it wasn't a complete surprise to him. So he came back after a couple of days and said, I think we can make this work. And they kept the contractor who was filling in for me while I was out. They kept her as well. And she retained, I think she was working pretty close to full time. So she retained her hours and we basically split the job. So she would cover for me on the days that I wasn't there. And then we split up the responsibilities together. And that worked out great. And I think it was also kind of a eye-opening for my team to see that out of this, they got kind of, they were going to not keep her after my maternity leave. And then they ended up keeping this contractor around as well. And so they got the benefit of having, kind of an extra person still, even though I was working less hours. And that worked out. And she ended up staying for like 10 or 12 years after that. And she turned into a full-time employee and basically kept that job when I left the team. So it worked out really well, both for us and for the team in that sense.
Yeah, although I'm curious how you managed to hold the line on your 25 hours. I mean, obviously, when you are so one of the considerations with going part time, first that if your manager had the idea that a work week was like 80 hours or something, then,
Right.
then 25 is like, well, what is this?
Yeah.
Or to say like, 2 long days is like 10 hours is not a normal day. It's a long day, for instance, right? Or that the 5 hours at home wouldn't turn into 50 hours at home. So I'm very curious how you had managed to structure the boundaries to maintain this 25-hour work week. And not just you, but in terms of the expectations of your team.
Right. So this is something I had to learn over time because you're right. The work will always come in. No one will tell you, oh, are you past your 25 hours? No one said that. The things that I found to work great was the fact that I had 2 days that I was in the office and the other days I was definitely not in the office. And the way we had our childcare set up, and I can talk about that in a minute because that is not something I recommend. I couldn't come in on those other 3 days even if I wanted to because I had no other childcare that day. So having that hard line in the sand about when I was in really helped with meetings and things because I could just decline meetings that were on days that I wasn't in the office. But the other thing is I had to manage that time, right? If it was starting to creep up, I either had to reach out to my coworker for some help if it was something urgent that needed to be handled that week, or just, let the people I'm working with know, hey, I'm part-time. We can postpone this, discussion until next week and I'll pick it up with you on Monday. And it was weird because I think a lot of the people that I worked with didn't realize that when you worked part-time, you actually got paid less. So they kind of assumed that I was just working fewer hours and still getting paid. And I think it made them a little bit resentful. And so I took that opportunity to, even though I didn't really have to kind of educate people on, this is how part-time works at our company. If you go below 20 hours, you don't get benefits anymore, just so they knew that I was not, collecting a full salary and only working, 25 hours. And so I think a lot of it was, me having to drive, this is my time that I'm working and this is not. But back to the childcare thing. So we had set up this arrangement, my husband and I, where I would, work Monday, Tuesday, and he had set up a separate compressed schedule arrangement with his manager where he was still working full time, but he would work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 hours. And so we basically would, we were never working on overlapping days. So we would do childcare on the days that we weren't working. And we thought, we were so proud of this arrangement. We thought it was great. And, got to both be very hands-on with our daughter, but it was grueling and I would never do that again. So we were basically either full-time work or full-time childcare for 6 days a week. And Sunday was the only day that we all had together to do nothing. So, and we still had a baby to take care of. So that was really rough. And I'm not sure I would have chosen that again, but it was, it was a good thing for us to try and see. His manager thought it was incredibly weird and was sending him all these calculations on how a nanny would be more cost effective and also easier. And I'm sure he meant well, but it was interesting. But, I'm glad we tried it. And we definitely found that for us, that didn't really work.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I, over the years, I've had a lot of people tell me similar things, right? And, families have come up with its very elaborate arrangements whereby they don't have to have any extra childcare. And I'm like, where did you get the idea that outside childcare was a sign of failure as a parent, thus such that you had to, work at 3 a.m. or something in order to make sure that nobody had any paid childcare going on. And so, I don't know where people get that. But as you said, it was a rough schedule. You tried it, moved on to other things later. Which brings me to the Chevy. I mean, you guys have done a lot of interesting different iterations in terms of with your girls, different schoolings. I know you were homeschooling for a while too, right? That was an iteration in there. So talk about that.
Yes. So we had moved to California to kind of a more rural area. And so basically your neighborhood school was the school you went to. There weren't a lot of choices. There weren't a lot of private schools in the area or anything like that. So we were super excited because it was a neighborhood school you could walk to, and we thought everything was all set and we were going to live there forever and it was all done. But we quickly found that our older daughter, it just was not a good fit for her school-wise. She wasn't challenged enough. She was starting to check out. And so school had offered her a grade skip over the summer. And I'm like, okay, I guess we can try that. It was kind of something I was hoping to avoid, but we figured we would try that. And it was, it was helpful, but not entirely helpful for her. And so halfway through her 4th grade year, and this was the beginning of 2019, we decided to pull her out to homeschool. And so California has an interesting sort of hybrid homeschool approach where you can sign up with a charter school. And this one happened to be through our neighboring school district. And they provide you with a teacher that you meet with either once a week or once every 2 weeks. And they make sure that you're going through all the stuff that you need to, all the subject areas. And we kept logs of what we did. And so that was kind of a good way. It was like homeschooling with training meals. So, we knew we had to cover these areas. They would give us, whatever materials we needed. They would order things for us. It was fabulous. And I was able to do that. At the time, I was working as a contract employee part-time. So I think I was working 30 hours. And so that worked pretty well. But I'll say that it worked well because our daughter is very motivated and focused. So I could do my work. She would go down her list for the day and take care of it. And she was motivated because once she finished her list, she could do whatever she wanted. So, from 9 to 12, she would focus on her work and then she would be done. And then one day a week, she had a full day of school where she would go to this school and have activities and, art class and science lab and all these things. And so it was, kind of 4 days a week of homeschooling and 1 day a week of actual school. And it worked really well for us, and we continued to do that, of course, until COVID ruined everything. So yeah, and it worked. But we continued then, obviously, once COVID hit, we had both kids at home. And then we had to do remote school for the younger one. We continued with the same homeschooling for the older one. And then the following year, the younger one signed up at a virtual school for the year of, where I think before the vaccine was available for COVID. And that was more structured. It was, she gets assignments from the school. They were set up to run automatically as a virtual school. So they only had classes for maybe 2 hours a day with plenty of breaks. And then she would get a list of things she had to complete. And that was much more hands-on. My younger one had to sit in my office because otherwise she would get distracted and she needed somebody to chat with while she was doing her work. That was hard for sure. And so, I think it really depended on the kid. If I needed to homeschool her, it would have been hard to put in kind of a full day of work at the same time. But at this point, we were in COVID times. And so, everybody was struggling with the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, similarly, it seems that, adults with remote work and kids with, homeschooling, it can be, some people it's a better fit than others,
Right.
and you just have to match the personality. Though I have to say, your daughters to me sound just incredibly sophisticated. And I know that you've done a lot of international travel with them. One thing that, Sarah and I both thought was so cool is you've taken each daughter on an international trip solo. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. It kind of happened by accident. So I had this dream when they were babies that we would go on this massive international trip every year. And so we started when my older one was 2 and I was pregnant. We went to Ireland for 3 weeks. And it was great. It was lovely, except that I had huge morning sickness the whole time I was there and a really bad sinus infection. And so my husband kind of got stuck with most of the childcare things. And I saw a lot of the inside of our Airbnb because I was too sick to go anywhere. So that was a little disappointing. And then on the flight back, I think my husband was traumatized because 2 hours into a 9-hour flight, our 2-year-old decided she was just done. And so he had to walk her up and down the plane for the better part of 7 hours. And so he was like, I'm not going anywhere until these kids are older. And so, I was like, okay, that's fine, because that was really hard. But around the time, I think the year my daughter was about to turn 7, I kind of got the itch to go somewhere again. And I was like, I think we can try it now. They're a little older. They were 7 and 4. And my husband's like, our 4-year-old is not ready for this. So he's like, why don't you take the older one somewhere and I'll take the younger one to see my parents in Arizona. I was like, okay, this is great. We can do this. So I let her pick. I narrowed the choices just like you do with toddlers, and you pick, 2 things you're happy with. I let her pick between Scandinavia and Japan. And she decided that she liked Scandinavia because of the idea that in the summer, the sun was out for longer and she could stay up late. So I was like, okay, that sounds great. So we had some friends that lived in Denmark. And so we kind of made plans to stay with them over a weekend. And then I hired a travel agent to kind of help us plan the itinerary to see, places in Norway as well as go to Stockholm. So she kind of planned an itinerary just as far as like how many days we'd be in each place and the transport between the places, but everything else was kind of up to us. And I did a lot of it on the fly. Like we would just wake up that day and say, hey, what do we want to see here? And it was amazing. Like I did not realize, I was a little apprehensive about traveling alone internationally, but it was super fun. I realized pretty quickly that you have to travel at kid pace. Like I can't see 3 different things in one day. Like we needed to come back and rest in the afternoon, even though she wasn't napping. Like just all that walking was unusual for both of us. So it was good to have a break. And we just, I would check in with her. We had one whole day where we just laid around in the hotel room and watched reruns of Project Runway. And she still talks about that. So, I'm like, we were in Stockholm and we're watching this show, but she thought it was great. So yeah, it was a really great experience. And so I didn't really deliberately plan to do it again. But then when my younger one was 6, my parents told me that they were going to visit my cousin who was working in China and asked if we wanted to come. And my husband did not really want to come. He said, we already had a trip planned later in the year. And so he didn't think all of us should go. He's like, but if you want to take our younger daughter, then I should do that. Because she was learning Chinese at the time at her elementary school. So I was like, that sounds a little bit scary, but okay. Like this is the kid that is not as good at flexibility and traveling. And, she kind of has a little more need for routine and things like that. But I was like, all right, let's give it a try. And it was, again, like an amazing experience. Like I don't get that much one-on-one time with either of them. So it was, to really be on our own in another country where we didn't know very many people was really cool. And just to find out, what are the things she finds interesting. I'd hand her my camera and she would take cool pictures of stuff I would never think to take pictures of. So it was it was a very cool experience, again, to kind of experience that through, the eyes of a 6-year-old. So, yeah.
Sounds amazing. So, I mean, not knowing Chinese does seem like it would be, or Mandarin would be a challenging way to travel
It was
in China.
actually surprising how many signs were in English. I think because they had the Olympics
Really?
a couple of
Okay.
years before. So
There you
everything in
go.
the subway was also in English at the airport and that sort of thing. But yeah, we actually relied on my 6-year-old to do things like ask for a fork or get napkins and things like that. So her teacher had actually spent a little bit of time teaching her some basic things like where's the bathroom? And
Yeah.
so it
A
was
key thing
super
to know.
helpful. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I was like, "Hey, can you go ask that guy where the bathroom is?" She would do it.
Bathroom is,
So
yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow, that is impressive. And it's interesting you said like taking good photos of something, photos you wouldn't have thought to take. And people are like, well, what photos do we think to take? But Anandi has a pretty amazing scrapbooking thing going on. Her scrapbooking game, very strong. If anyone follows her on Instagram, you've been doing scrapbooking in sort of high level for a great many years. So tell us a little bit about that, where you make the time for this and what you've done with it over the years.
yeah. So I started in 2012, just before my younger daughter was born. And it I had I would just say before 2007, I had no hobbies at all. My hobby was work. I would just work more. And somewhere around there, I got a little burnt out on work and I was like, I need to find something else that I like to do. And so I actually started making jewelry and taking classes to learn how to do that. And it was really fun and I really enjoyed it. But there's only so much jewelry. Like I can make it, but then it starts to pile up. Like I could give it to people as gifts, but
You only have so many ears,
that's
right?
right. And so I'm like, okay, I kind of, and I kind of learned about scrapbooking and it took a while, maybe 4 or 5 years. Around 2012, I started scrapbooking, and I just fell in love with it. I did mostly, kind of paper scrapbooking, and it was a kind of a good relief to get away from the computer. I spend all day in front of a computer for work, so it was nice to have something that was very tactile and hands-on. I got stickers and glue and paper and things. I loved it. Like, and when you love something like that, you just make time for it, right? Every opportunity I would get, I would, spend some time. I had an office that was also my craft space, and so, every opportunity I could find, I would be in there. And, if you do something a lot, you get pretty good at it. And so at some point, I decided when there was a period where I wasn't working. And so I decided I would try to scrapbook for other people. And so I started a little business making small scrapbooks for other people, usually baby books, but I did a couple of wedding albums as well. And it was really fun. People would just give me a dump of all their pictures from the event or from, their kids' first 5 years. And I would kind of sift through them and figure it out and talk to them about what was important and what they wanted to capture. And that was really fun. But it was also a lot of very time consuming. And it basically kept me from doing my own scrapbooking. And so I missed that. And so once I went back to work, it wasn't really feasible to spend that kind of time on other people's scrapbooks. And so I kind of decided to stop doing that. But I still continued my own scrapbooking, and I've kind of branched out as well into digital scrapbooking. I don't have as much of an aversion to the computer anymore. I can scrapbook on my iPad. There are even apps on your phone to be able to do it. And it's just so nice to have a hobby that is not work related. I do now read more than I used to, for sure. But there's something different about scrapbooking. Like it really feels like it's something that I'm consciously making time for. And I can tell when I haven't been doing it for a while, like I feel kind of unhappy, like something's missing. So I don't consciously like set aside time. But now that my girls are older and can entertain themselves and they can be in another part of the house without me worrying about what they're doing there, I feel like my time has opened up dramatically. And so, I could probably scrapbook for 4 hours straight on a weekend and not, have to worry about what else is happening in the house, which is
Oh, that
pretty
sounds
amazing.
heavenly.
Yes,
We'll get there eventually.
you will.
So, I mean, a lot of our listeners do listen to Sarah's other podcast, Best Laid Plans, and heard you on there talking about your digital organization systems. But for the listeners who don't yet listen to Sarah's podcast but should, or maybe people who missed that episode, could you just give us a quick rundown of how you keep the Creath empire going between all of you guys and all the stuff you have going on.
Yes. We are, as you might imagine, very technology dependent on this. So I talked a little bit or a lot about my system in Trello with Sarah. And that's sort of more personal for me. So it's all the things that I need to do pretty much in my life, except for work. And so that's one place where I keep, things like I need to call for a pediatrician appointment, that kind of stuff. Just stays in Trello until I get it done. It's my to-do item. But my husband and I have a shared Google Calendar, which we are now sharing with our older daughter, on her various devices. And that's where we put down things that will affect the family. Like, so he doesn't have my whole work calendar, but if I have a meeting during the time that I'm supposed to pick somebody up, I'll put that on there so that he knows he needs to do pickup. We still talk about it. I mean, day to day on who's picking up who and what time. But the calendar really helps because he's right now actually interviewing for jobs. And so he'll put those on the calendar and I'll see, oh, on Thursday, he's got an interview. So I need to do school pickup. And that shared Google Calendar we've had probably for 10 years now. And it's worked really, really well. We put school events on there and all those kind of shared family things. The other thing that we do, and I think I picked it up from your podcast, is that we have one shared email that we use with all the schools and any activities so that both of us see whatever's coming through. Like there's still somebody, one of us, that's kind of the point person for whatever that activity is. Like he takes, it's very gendered. He takes the sports and I take the language classes or whatever. But like, at least we can see it. I can say, hey, like the coach said, we need to bring snacks. Are you on it? And that kind of thing. It's been really helpful to have that because there will be times where he'll miss something and I'll say, hey, did you see that? And he'll be like, oh no, let me go look for that, and vice versa. So that shared email is really great. Then the other person who we like to affectionately refer to as a member of our family is Alexa, our Amazon Echo Dot. We have a whole network of them in our house. And when the girls were doing virtual schooling during COVID, we would set up that Echo Dot with all the reminders of what time they needed to log into class. We still do that for school. Like there's obviously there's an alarm when everybody needs to get up to get ready for school. It's pretty early. It's 6 a.m. here. And then there's another one that goes off at 6:55 a.m. to tell them to put shoes on when it's time to walk out the door. I kind of got tired of reminding them the same things every single day and being the timekeeper. So we let Alexa be the bad guy now. And it works really well. They've started to ignore the reminders a little bit, which is making me a little sad, but we're working on that. But mostly they do listen. So
it turns out that they can ignore Alexa just as they can ignore mom.
They can. Yes.
So humorously, when we don't have an Alexa, but we were at somebody else's house once who did. And this was when my now 7-year-old was probably about 3. And he kept calling it Charlotte. He could not remember that its name was Alexa.
That's awesome.
So because he'd be yelling, Charlotte, and it wouldn't do anything.
Right. That's excellent.
So out of curiosity, if your husband's interviewing, is he mostly looking for remote stuff? Do you think this is going to, continue being like a 2 remote family, or, you open to doing other stuff?
He is strongly preferring remote work. And I think he's a software engineer, so that should be pretty easy to come by. I think he's been working remotely since 2014, I think. And he's basically decided he never wants to go back into an office every day again. So, and for him, it works really well because he needs a lot of long focus time to write code. And so it's a lot easier to get that at home, I think, than in an office full of cubes with other people. So, yeah.
Totally agree. I can't imagine going into an office every day.
No.
it would totally kill me. But, I know people do it and some people love it. So,
Yes.
what would sort of take away from this? Like different people, different
Yes.
people like different things. We are not those people. This has been awesome. I love hearing about, the strategies you guys use and everything. So we always end with a love of the week. I can go first, although I know you listened to the show. So you knew this was coming.
Yes.
So my love of the week is a very non-Phoenix related thing, is ice skating.
Oh.
So here on the East Coast, where it is cold during winter, we can do outdoor ice skating in certain places. And so there's a rink that we like to go to, and it's so fun to just be out and, moving around. I really like it. And I got to say, I thought my children liked it more than possibly they do. It's like, oh, I'm doing this for the kids. No, I'm not doing it for the kids. I mean, it's me. So now that I know that, I'm like, well, I could just like take an afternoon off and go do it. And I could just go ice skating.
Yes.
And not have to worry about, lacing up children's ice skates. I was a bit surprised how old of my children I needed to help with that. But, so goes. I love ice skating. It's a lot of fun. How about you?
All right. I have a very fluffy recommendation. I have a recommendation for the Stylebook app. And this is an app where you basically create an inventory of your wardrobe. And then you can record each day what you're wearing. You can use it to make outfits. But the part that I like the best is this data. So they have data on you could see what haven't I worn in the last year? What have I never worn? What is the cost per wear of this item? So you put in how much you paid originally, and then it divides it by the number of times you've worn it. I'm such a nerd that I think that's really fun. So I've been using it. And as of today, I think I've been logging my outfits for 561 days.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't do anything for that long.
Again, since I follow you on Instagram, there was a challenge, right? Where you were trying to put together outfits that were vaguely Disney inspired, but weren't costumes, right?
Yes.
There's okay.
It's a whole
Please
thing.
share.
So it's called Disney bounding. And I didn't totally realize the extent of this, but there are people who do this almost every day, I think. And there's hashtags and everything you can follow. But yeah, the idea is that you take a character, figure out what colors they wear, and then figure out how to make an outfit that's inspired by those colors. And so I'm in a Facebook group that does these outfit challenges. And this was one of them. And I'd never tried it. And it turns out I have a lot of different colors and I could make lots of outfits. And my girls thought it was super fun. So I would make them guess every morning who I was supposed to be. And they were pretty good at it. So yeah, it's fun. I don't know if I could really handle that every day. That was a lot of planning and preparation and sometimes wearing things I wouldn't wear together. But it was fun to do for a week.
Yeah, well, if you need to look like Elsa, I guess
that's right.
You got to find that blue. Got to find that blue somewhere.
Yeah, and I work remotely, right? So nobody really sees me, so it's fine.
No, it's fine. You can look like whatever, any of them. Jasmine.
Exactly.
So, well, Anandi, this has been awesome. I mean, is there some place that our listeners who did want to connect with you could find you?
Sure. The only real social media I use is Instagram. I'm Anandi RC, ANANDI RC.
Wonderful. Well, please check that out. And thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was really fun.
All right. Well, that was amazing. I love talking with her. And Sarah actually got to talk with Anandi about her planning system for best laid plans. And so if you have not listened to that episode, I do think I plug it in the interview, if I'm remembering correctly. But if I didn't, or you missed that part of the interview, please go check that out. So best laid plans from a few months ago. So our question for today, dealing with professional issues, as we've been talking about with this episode. Sarah, do you have a good rubric for deciding if a professional opportunity is good, as in worth it, or not?
I think I say yes to too much at this point, and I think I've finally reached a point where I am starting to say no more. I actually said a flat no to two things. It happened to be during my call week, so I don't know if that was part of it. One was my hobby related. It was like a podcast guest appearance that might have been fun, but would have taken some work to prepare, and I just didn't have the bandwidth right now. And another was a professional speaking invitation that, again, I wasn't that excited about it, and I was sort of like, I don't really get that much out of this, so I'm going to just say no this time. And I'm not used to saying no. And both times I found myself editing my email, wait, I don't have to apologize.
No.
I think I still did.
No.
I mean, I said something like, I'm sorry, I'm not able to fit this in right now. Thank you so much for thinking of me. That was
that's
my
perfect.
my
Perfect. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. I mean, it's, certainly when, people are deciding, should I go to this conference? Would this meeting be worth going to? Would, this all sorts of learning opportunities, is it worth, showing my face in X, Y, or Z? I think there's a couple of questions you can ask. A good one is always would I do this tomorrow? So especially the further something is in the future, the more it feels like you are assigning it to somebody completely different who will have far more than 24 hours in the day and won't be like you at all. So she'll be happy to do it, unlike you, who will not. But if you find yourself, thinking that way, just ask yourself, would I do this tomorrow? And if the answer is no, I would not do this tomorrow, then that should be your answer for basically any point. Because you know how you will feel tomorrow in a way that it's just hard to identify how you'll feel 6 months down the road. I think another thing, if you find yourself talking yourself into it, that's also probably a bad idea. There are a great many things in life that we are truly excited about. And we tend not to have to talk ourselves into those things that we are truly excited about. But if you're sitting there saying, well, maybe it would be good on my resume to do X, like, when have you last used your resume for something? It's just like, it's okay. It's okay. Just let it go. More things that you'll be more excited will come into your life. But the flip side of that's true. Like if you find yourself like really excited about it, but you're just a little bit anxious because maybe it's outside your comfort zone. It's not something you've done before, maybe like it's a little bit of a stretch for you. Like that's probably a good yes. That's a good yes. If you find yourself excited about it, but you're just a little bit nervous or anxious, like don't let the nervousness and anxiousness keep you from taking the risk and trying it, because you'll probably be happy you did. So, you can also like picture yourself on the other side of it. Like, am I going to be happy to have done this? Even if it was tomorrow, would I be happy to have done this? And if the answer is yes, then might be worth giving it a shot.
And I think where you are in your career might matter as well. I definitely feel like when I was first starting out, I think it was really good to say yes to things, because then you get to meet more people. People understand where your competencies and strengths are, and you're just sort of getting your name out there and being seen as a person who, hey, like she does things. But then as you've done a lot of things and now you have a lot of things on your plate because you've become that person, I am that person, I think, then you have to start saying no, because you literally run out of self.
And hours in the day. Only so many, as we keep learning. All right. Well, this has been Best of Both Worlds. We've been talking to Anandi Raman Creath. I butchered it in the thing too, and she was very gracious about it. But longtime Best of Both Worlds listener, wonderfully organized person, so many facets with the tech career and the scrapbooking, which I'm just personally obsessed with. I love looking at her pictures on Instagram. But please, go check that out. We'll be back next week with more on making work and life fit together.
Thanks for listening. You can find me, Sarah, at theshoebox.com or at @the_shoebox on Instagram.
And you can find me, Laura, at lauravanderkam.com. This has been the Best of Both Worlds podcast. Please join us next time for more on making work and life work together.